Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to Roots Refuge Farm. I just popped out to the greenhouse. I've been doing some baking and some work in the kitchen. Just kind of needed a break and I got to a stopping point. I needed some sunshine and outside time. I have a hard time with days that are entirely indoor work, and today's been one of those days. So I came out here. It's nice and sunny, middle of the afternoon. The roosters are crowing, the cows are mooing, and I wanted to talk to you guys about something that's really been on my mind lately, and kind of plant the seed of thought in your mind, maybe, so that you could be planning appropriately for this gardening season. So this is the kind of video that oftentimes gets shared outside my normal circle of viewers. I typically make videos not to be discovered, but to cater to my already existing audience. It's actually something that is somewhat not recommended for content creators. Often we're told to make thumbnails and titles and content that will reach the broader masses, but I really love the community that we have here. I love the fact that my comment section, I believe, is really the nicest people on the internet. I don't really have to deal with a lot of nastiness on a regular basis because the majority of my viewers are subscribers. However, occasionally I'll kind of branch out and talk about a topic that does get shared a lot, and typically that brings in a lot of newer people. So if this happens to be your introduction to my channel, hi, welcome. This is my greenhouse, this is my farm, this is my channel. My name is Jessica Sowards, and I love sharing my passion about growing and eating real food. I love the garden, raising animals, and trying to be mindful in raising a family in this setting. I am a firm believer in hope over fear, and though I'm doing a lot of things that are prepper things to do, I very much believe in the wisdom of being prepared. I like to do it from the stance of thriving instead of just surviving, because my thought is, if there ever actually is a need for survival, I'll already be there ready to go. But on the average day, I'm really just happy to be eating great dinner. So I recently did a video talking about some hot topics, namely the big hot topic that has been all over all of the gardening groups I'm in, that has been just a huge point of discussion in the gardening world, is the fact that the first GMO seed is currently being introduced at a consumer level. Prior to this season, I've made tons of content talking about, hey, don't worry. I know some seed companies say non-GMO seeds, but there are no GMO seeds for sale on a consumer level. And prior to this season, that was true. However, I can't say that anymore because it's not true. There is now a tomato that is being sold to consumers that has the genetics of snapdragons. That is a flower that has been spliced in to create this really, really rich purple color. Now, there's been some controversies and a lot of different things that have popped up around that. You could dive deep into those things. It's not really the point of the video for me today. Today, I want to talk to you about seed saving and why, when I read about a GMO tomato, this is my response. So I just recorded several minutes of talking and I'm starting seeds. I'm not going to use what I just said because I'm guilty sometimes of thinking too much about how something's going to land when I really just need to say what I'm actually thinking. Navigating this size audience is freaking hard sometimes. I want to be authentic, I want to be honest, but I also want to be gentle, and I want what I say to be true. I mean, really, that's the bottom line. I really want what I say to be the truth, and not just my perception, but the actual truth. And that is hard sometimes because my emotions get in the way. My own fears and concerns get in the way. And also, it's not just my fears about the issues, it's my fears about what people are going to respond to what I'm saying. And so I'll think a lot about how something needs to land. I'm very even-keeled in my response to things. The reason why is because I actually just feel a lot of peace. That's what I settle into. Now, that's not to say that I do not have extremely reactionary and catastrophic responses. I typically go in my mind to the worst case scenario in any situation. So like when I heard that there's a GMO tomato being released to the public, all of a sudden, I mean, I am in my mind going to all of the places where that could go wrong for like humanity and tomatoes as a whole. But ultimately what I end up doing is settling back into my faith, to what I know to be true, and to the power that I have to respond instead of react. I think that we all have a choice in anything in life. We can be reactionary, which is our knee-jerk. A lot of times this is going to be our fear. It is going to be our emotions. It is going to be thinking in the worst case scenario. Or we can choose to process things to the point that we can find the wisdom and then respond. And sometimes the response is to say nothing. Sometimes the response is to do something. Sometimes the response is not nearly as gratifying as the reaction. When I shared my thoughts on this, I was very much even keeled, middle of the road. And ultimately what a lot of people end up doing, some people just completely disagree with me. That's fine. I am so tolerant of other viewpoints. I know I'm typically more tolerant than a lot of other people of other viewpoints. And so I tend to deal more with people being intolerant of me rather than me being intolerant of them. Like, I am completely okay with you thinking that GMO tomatoes are the best thing you ever heard of and you can't wait to put in your garden. Now, the fact that people think like that is weighing into my response, because I'm okay with people taking their stance, but I'm going to take mine. One thing I deal with, though, when I talk about current events and things going on in the world is that I'll oftentimes have people tell me, well, you must just not understand the corruption, and they will attempt to educate me on the corruption. My even-keeled response is not out of a place of ignorance. I am fully aware of the corruption that's going on. I think that's probably evidenced in the choices that I make in my life. I mean, my entire life's work is growing food and teaching other people to grow food. I am so passionate about it because I'm fully aware of the corruption in our food system, and I believe that whenever we have food, we have freedom, and I want people to experience that. I want to be frank that I do think that it's a big deal that there's a GMO tomato seed that is being released. Not because the GMO tomato seed in and of itself is harmful. I don't necessarily think that it is. I think that it could lead to some very harmful introductions in the same vein. That I do think that. With that being the case, I mean, I can go down some very like catastrophizing routes that can say all the things that could go wrong. But what happens when I go there is that I'm ultimately just completely crippled by fear. Realizing when I get to that point, you got to rein it back in, because today I have to wake up and decide what I'm going to do with today. And what I like to do more than anything is I like to consider the situation, anything that's going on in the world. We're living in a very interesting time to be alive. A lot of people are feeling a ton of pressure because of things that are going on in the world right now. And with that being true, my hope is to always rein it back into where I'm currently standing. And I want to think, what's the next step? When I see all this information, when I feel all of the emotions that comes up, when I think of all the ways that it could go wrong, what's the next step? Where I actively am. Not where things could be, not what could go wrong, but today, what is the next step? Because I'm afraid that sometimes what happens is we can get so lost in the worst case scenario and so lost in all the potential of really awful outcomes, or so lost in the realization of corruption that we become paralyzed and we don't move at all and we don't do anything. And in my understanding, historically, where there is corruption in any sort of government, in any sort of system, in any sort of corporate greed, like any sort of corruption that is existing, it is almost always empowered by people being hopeless within that corruption. The biggest threat to any corrupt system is people who are full of hope. Therefore, we must maintain a place that we can formulate and see clearly our next action step that maintains our feeling of hope. That's the only best response to living in systems filled with corruption. I'm sorry if that's vague. I don't know how else to put it. I think people will understand that if you are feeling those feelings of fear. So for me, when I think about the GMO tomato, and I think about all the ways that that could go wrong for humanity and tomatoes, my response is this year I want to save a lot of seeds. And today, this is going to be a big theme in my garden this year. I am going to put a lot of focus on saving seeds this year. As I said, I like to really aim at thriving rather than surviving. I really believe that you can't lose doing that. If I say, I see the potential for catastrophe here, I see the corruption, I see how this could all go wrong, if my response to that is, I'm gonna save a whole lot of seeds, not only am I equipped if it does go poorly, if it doesn't, I have a lot of seeds. I'm thriving rather than surviving. And therefore I'm empowered, and therefore I have hope. So my big concern with the introduction of the GMO tomato, more than anything else, is the idea that we really don't understand what those genetics could do when cross-pollinating with other plants. So I love the fact that we have access to all these heirlooms. My table's covered in seeds right now. Because each one of these represents an individual who chose stewardship, who chose the inconvenience of saving seeds, of taking care of them, of sharing them, of naming them, of valuing them. I love the stories behind heirlooms because to me, it speaks of the intentions of humanity to care about something like seeds. There's a really great novel that I read a while ago called The Seed Keeper, and it kind of speaks of this. There's a really great book called Braiding Sweetgrass that kind of speaks of this. And of course, we've seen like native people groups and individuals throughout time who have literally just, they honor seeds, and I love that so much. And I'm afraid that that's a little lost in our current cultures in a lot of ways. But I think more than ever right now, where there are these introductions that are being made that could potentially call into question the security of our seed varieties, we should start paying attention to that. And those of us who care need to take responsibility for that care and say, okay, what can I do personally to put into action the concern that I have? Now, as I said, my concern is that like we don't know how these genetically modified plants that are going to be in home gardens could potentially cross. Like, do we know that? Is it going to create sterile varieties? Is it going to create, let's say, this purple tomato that's being introduced? How readily does that cross-pollinate, and how readily does that purple gene then take over into other varieties? I don't know. There's not any research. I actually tried to look it up and see, and I wasn't able to find anything as far as people actually testing that yet. Nobody's tested that. And my thought when I go down the road of what if, how could this play out in a negative sense, it could be that it's nothing, but it could be that 5 years from now, when we now have lots of different GMO varieties available on a consumer level, and now you can go into the Home Depot and buy these tomato plants, and are they going to be marked? I don't know. Like, are people going to realize that that's what they're putting in their garden? If I am growing a purely heirloom garden, but someone who lives next door to me, which wouldn't be an issue here because I've got a lot of space, but like if I were in a neighborhood, if someone lived next door to me, had their garden full of GMO plants, is there a likelihood of that cross-pollinating with my garden? And you can see that you could go down that what if route, and it could get pretty hairy pretty quick. And my thing is, well, I love my yellow tomato, Dr. Witchies. I love Paul Robeson. I love Aunt Ruby's German green. This tomato that comes all the way down from, there's this story behind it, and it comes from this woman who saved the seeds and passed them on to her nephew. And what if I were growing my garden next to somebody who filled their garden up with GMO seeds? Well, if I save seeds from my garden, are my Aunt Ruby's German greens going to be purple next year? I don't know, like that's a real possibility. Well, right now, a lot of times I don't save seeds. I know how. I've done content about it in the past. I do save some seeds, but I mean, look at this. I got a table full of seed packets here because I have access to them. I can buy them. It's simple, it's easy. But all of these seeds were grown by growers. Most seed companies, they get their seeds from people who grow subcontracted for them. Well, what if those growers live next to somebody. You know, like what measures are being taken to make sure that those seeds they're saving are pure? Because I've ordered many seeds from many different seed companies that didn't quite come up exactly what it was supposed to. And it was probably just some cross-pollination happened. No big deal. It doesn't freak me out because I've always been like, oh, well, I'll get a hybrid. It's not a big deal. But if there is the potential of cross-pollination, and we're talking about genetics that we don't really understand and can't really fully control or predict, then you could see that there is a potential that the purity of our seeds could be at risk or in danger. And to me, the most natural response to that is not to necessarily just raise the alarm and point out the problem, though I do feel a little bit of alarm, though I do see the problem, because I don't want to be reactionary, I want to be responsive. My response is, we should all really focus on saving seeds and essentially create seed banks for ourselves. Those of us who are actively gardening right now, if this is something we care about, we can say, I'm going to be the person that keeps the seeds. I'm going to be the person that cares. I'm getting my little Lorax feeling going on in here. Like, I'll be the person that stands for the seeds and encourage other people to do the same. And that ultimately brings so much hope to the situation because we do have power. We do have access to this. If you're growing a garden this year, you have access to everything you need to create a fail-safe against the potential of the loss of these seeds. So I love studying history, and one thing that I find extremely fascinating is that throughout history, I'll use the example here. I live in the Midlands of South Carolina. You know, this is basically like where a lot of the Civil War took place. And there's this story that I heard here about when Sherman came through. After the Civil War, basically what happened was that the North came through and really destroyed a lot of places in the South because the South had lost and they were basically trying to end it. And really, historically, throughout all wars, whenever one people group is conquering another, what they target to keep the conquered people group from rising up and like fighting longer or trying to fight more is they would conquer their food sourcing. So whenever this whole area was burned, like the town that I live next to, there aren't any buildings that are older than the Civil War, though this was actually very much there were communities here prior to that. It just all got burned down. And what was really targeted was they came through and they destroyed seed storage, and they destroyed all like the farming implements, killed animals, like basically destroyed people's capacity to grow food, because there's no way that anybody can form an army if they can't eat. Like whenever you take away people's basic human needs, it completely disempowers them. So interestingly, there's a story here in the Midlands that I have heard that there were some people that came through and they basically gathered up a whole lot of seeds from different people and they rode out ahead of the conquering armies to protect the seeds from these armies. And there are heirlooms here in the Midlands that predate the Civil War because somebody made the effort to protect them from being destroyed. And this is like pretty common throughout history, that if there was one people group conquering another, targeting their seed storage was just, it's a war tactic of disabling a people group, taking away their capacity to be able to grow food. All of that to say, it's so hard to talk about this stuff. I swear it is so hard. And it really has nothing to do with, this does not have to do with me being afraid of what people will think. It's just that I hate the alarm. I hate selling fear. I don't want to sit here and be like, they're trying to take away our capacity to grow food. Even if that's true, I want to respond accordingly. Because if that were true and I was just fully focused on that, how in the world could I get up tomorrow and work my tail off growing food today? Like, you got to find the balance. And so it's very hard for me to talk about these things without sounding like an alarmist, because I want to be honest and I genuinely do not feel alarmed. I do not feel dismantled. I do not feel disabled. I do not feel incapable of doing something. So I have to make the case of like, hey, I could see this going this way. to tell you why I'm so urgently saving seeds. But I don't want to make you afraid, because I don't feel afraid. Because I do feel hope. I feel so much hope. Oh my gosh, I don't even know if this video is ever going to see the light of day. Here's the big thing that you need to know. See this? I just pulled this out of my cabinet. I've used these for years because I am passionate about heirlooms, okay? I call these plant condoms. They're not. They're little party bags for weddings where people put Jordan almonds in them. You know, you've seen these? You get the little thing, or the rice or bird seed or whatever you're going to throw at the bride and groom. Party bags, mesh. So the way that you use these for, I'm going to use tomatoes as an example. I have an old video that I made years ago, like my first year on YouTube. I shot it in the summer when I had a whole lot of plants in my garden, and I actively showed how to save seeds from each plant. I will find that video and put a link to it down below. I apologize for the quality. It was way in the beginning, but it has really solid information. I plan on trying to shoot another video like that this year, and I plan on making a big theme in my garden this year, seed saving, because I've grown lax in it due to the access that I have to lots of seeds, and I am recognizing the fact, like, hey, it's not time to be lax in this anymore. Let's save lots of seeds. These, however, I want to tell you about now so you can order them and have them available and plan on saving seeds this year. So you can plan your garden around seed saving. So with these, with a tomato, and it's the same for peppers and eggplants, they are self-pollinating plants, meaning the blossoms on these plants have both the male and female parts, and within that blossom, it has the pollen and it has the receptors for that pollen in order to create the fruit on that plant. And so what you do with these is, in the instance of a tomato, when you have a branch that has some blossoms on it, you take one of these bags, you put it over that cluster of blossoms, you tighten it. You do this before the blossoms ever open. And then once they open, they're protected in this bag, which means that no outside pollen can reach those blossoms. Meaning that the only pollen they're going to have access to is from the plant itself, meaning that when it pollinates those blossoms, you have a pure seed. Okay, this protects it from bees coming, it protects it from wind carrying anything over, it protects it from the plant that's next to it, it protects it from the neighbor's plants and whatever's growing there. And all you do when you come out, once those blossoms are open, is you grab this branch, you just shake it a little bit. You do that a few times just to make sure that that pollen is getting where it needs to go. And once the plant sets fruit, you take a ribbon or a string or something, you tie it around that branch so that you can remember which one it was that you isolated. You take the bag off and you let that fruit grow, and then you save those fruits, and they're pure. They've not cross-pollinated. So when we are talking about the likelihood of cross-pollination and the danger of cross-pollination with our garden plants, potentially with GMO plants, and we think about the dangers of that, this is a solution. It's not hard. It's not terrifying. It requires some intention. It requires some awareness. And if nothing else, right now, we have to be the ones that care about the seed. Whether that is for the sake of maintaining our freedom and being able to grow food, or whether that is just being the person that rides ahead with the seeds to save them for future generations. It's this simple. And throughout the whole garden, there are ways that we can protect it from cross-pollination. So I have a lot of people that come along and they say, oh, I really wanted to save seeds, but I started looking and it's saying that I need to plant my varieties 500 feet apart or 50 yards apart or whatever it is that's suggested. I mean, most individuals who are home gardening cannot provide those kind of parameters for their seeds to make sure they stay pure. But what you can do is use barriers. So for instance, like with a squash, if you want to save a squash plant, you want to maintain the purity of those seeds, all you have to do is cover blossoms before they open. Just cover them up. You know, you can use netting, tulle, whatever, just cover them. When they open, you're going to go and manually pollinate. You can use a paintbrush. You can take the male blossom. You'll know it. It looks, honestly, the inside of a male squash blossom looks pretty phallic. Like you'll be able to tell the difference between the male and the female squash blossoms. You take that and you put the pollen inside the squash blossom that has the fruit behind it. You'll be able to tell the difference. And then you tie the blossom shut. to make sure that nothing else comes in there. I would say squash is probably one of the things that most readily cross-pollinates in a garden. For the time being, and what I'm planning on doing this year, is I'm really going to focus on tomato seeds this year, and potentially other nightshades, eggplants, and peppers, namely, because that is the introduction that's being made of GMO seeds. But all through my garden this year, I'm really hoping to save a lot of all the seeds. Now, normally, like I said, I've gotten kind of lax with seed saving. I used to do it way more before I had the platform. Now I get sent so many seeds and I can afford to buy them. And so I've gotten lax, and I want to correct that. Back when I used to be more disciplined in saving seeds, I would save like 1 tomato's worth of seeds, because I knew that even with sharing them with friends, that would be plenty of seeds for me to be able to grow the next year, and potentially even for a couple years after, because inside 1 tomato, you can easily pull, 50 to 100 seeds out of 1 tomato, sometimes even more than that. This year, my goal is to put back about 500 seeds from each of my favorite varieties. I'm not going to save every single one, but as far as let's say maybe top 20 varieties, I'm hoping to save about 500, maybe even more seeds of each variety. And I will put some of those in short-term storage, like in little plastic bags like this, mark them and keep them out to grow in the next couple years. But I'm planning on putting hundreds of these seeds in bags and putting them in the bottom of my freezer. The reason for that, you do not have to store seeds in your freezer. In fact, if you're going to be getting them in and out to use regularly, it's probably best not to put them in their freezer. But putting them in the freezer can really aid long-term storage. Now, I've seen where people have grown. I know Luke over at My Gardener, he grew like an 80-something-year-old tomato seed he got out of a shadow box. There's another. I had someone share with me on my Facebook group once that they had pulled some seeds out that were like 40-something years old that their grandfather had in a coffee can in a barn. So not ideal temperature controlled, humidity controlled at all, and they were able to grow them and bring them back, and then of course save seeds from them and have them. So it's totally doable without even putting them in the freezer, but I want to put some in the freezer. I may even create some other seed banks. I may share them with other people to do the same. But my thought is, right now, when I'm seeing the potential of a not great situation, the automatic response is to just create some sort of fail-proofing against that, create some sort of protection against that. And my thought is if I can share this with you guys, and if even 1,000 of you say, I'm going to buy bags, I'm going to create a seed bank for myself and for my community, I'm going to save several hundred of a few varieties of seeds, that even if there was something that went really badly, even if there became a lot of GMO seeds and they started cross-pollinated and we started having the threat of losing varieties, if there are enough people who in hope are willing to care and take reasonable action steps, catastrophizing potential just has a whole lot less power for everything to go sideways. And if we sit here and we're just so afraid that we don't do anything, then what will we do if things go sideways? I'm going to put a lot of focus on it this year. I will put the link to the previous video showing how to save seeds. And I'm going to keep encouraging you guys to just kind of put that in the back of your mind. Let's think about seed storage. Let's think about being the ones that, see a potential threat to the seeds and ride ahead with enough storage, because it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to be able to start fresh. 500 seeds, 1,000 seeds in a baggie in the bottom of the freezer is enough to grow 1,000 plants. And with 1,000 plants, you've got however many fruits is going to grow on each one of those plants, and however many seeds is going to be in each one of those fruits. You're talking about a massive amount of potential. It doesn't take that many people to ride ahead of a threat saying, I'm going to protect the seeds, for it to actually be able to make a massive difference 200 years later. There are seeds that I am actively growing in my garden that we got from a local man that are said to have been a part of that riding ahead of the destruction that were supposedly preserved in that. And I know how important that is to me now. So I'm just, it's not that hard to just say, okay, I'm gonna buy the Jordan almond bags, and I'm gonna I'm going to take the extra few steps. And I'm telling you that I think that it's important. It gives me hope. Saving seeds gives me hope. It makes me realize, like, hey, we're not just fully at the mercy of all the things that could go wrong. There are still things that we can do, even on a very small scale, that potentially matter a whole lot. So those are my thoughts. Hope they land. If not, you know, we'll still grow great tomatoes and have a good time doing it. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and all the days you do. God bless you. Until next time.